Check this out. 2 million people took to the streets of Italy to protest against Israel. 2 million people, guys. Over 2 million people across Italy have rallied in more than 100 cities for a one-day general strike. I've never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything like this. This is so insane. More than 2 million people across Italy rallied in over 100 cities Friday for a one-day general strike to support the residents of Gaza and a humanitarian aid mission, Italy's largest union said. Italian unions proclaimed the strike after the global Samud flotilla that was trying to break Israel's naval blockade to deliver aid to Gaza was intercepted by Israeli naval forces Wednesday night. Protests and demonstrations have sprung up all over Europe and globally since then, but they have been particularly strong in Italy. Italy's conservative Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, had sharply criticized the strike. I mean, she's only going to get people to get more pissed off at her. That's all she's doing. Now they're going to say, okay, whose side are you on, Meloni? Are you on the side of the Italian people, or are you on the side of Israel? Are you working for the interest of Israel or for the Italian people? Which one is it? And now they're going to want someone who's going to be even more extreme than Meloni. Because remember, Meloni is supposed to be this far-right, Nazi, fascist, Mussoliniite, Italian woman, blah, 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 blah. People are going to say, we need someone more extreme than Meloni. Meloni is cucked. Meloni is with the Zionists. We don't want this. She's either going to have to become more extreme, or we're going to need someone more extreme than her. Do you see how the pro-Palestine trend is doing a second phase of the Great Awakening that's been going on since 2014? We had what happened in 2014 when nationalism revived due to the migrant crisis. Now we're seeing the second phase of this. There's no longer a stigma against nationalism. Now we're seeing the second phase of this trend, in which the stigma against being anti-Israel, the stigma of being let's be real here, pro-anti-Semitism, pro-Hitler or whatever, is being overhauled out. That stigma is being purged out in the second phase that we're living in right now. That's what's happening. Because as people look at Israel, they're saying, man, maybe Hitler was right. So that stigma against Hitler is being thrown out. It's being gradually, not gradually, I would say fairly quickly, just purged out in this phase that we're in right now. And that's what you're seeing. And it says here that she anticipated it would cause widespread disruption across the country and said it was politically motivated and targeted her right-wing government. According to the CGIL union, 300,000 people marched through the streets of Rome alone, while the national average participation in the general strike stood at around 60%, halting all the main services in key sectors, including transportation and schools. So trains stopped, buses stopped. 60% of the workforce in Italy took part in this strike. That's crazy. I've never heard of anything like this. In Florence, protesters approached the gates of the Italian national soccer team's training center to demand its upcoming World Cup qualifier against Israel not be played because of the war in Gaza. Protesters appeared to behave peacefully on the opposite side of the street from the soccer complex, holding aloft a banner that read in Italian, "Let's stop Zionism with the resistance." So they see themselves as being a part of a global intifada. Resistance, that's intifada. So what's happening here is the stigma of, well, you can't be anti-Israel, that's anti-Semitic. That whole stigma is disintegrating before our eyes. That's what's happening. Just like in 2014, 15, 16, 17, the stigma against nationalism disintegrated due to the migrant crisis, due to terrorism, ISIS, etc. So right now we're in part 2 of this saga. That's what's happening. First, it was removing the stigma against nationalism. Now that that stigma has been removed, now it's about removing the stigma against Nazism, Hitlerism, all that stuff. And I'm not saying that these people are all Nazis, but what I am saying is a lot of people are going down that route. And I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not. I'm very critical of Israel. I'm just giving you guys the reality here. And I'm just warning you guys not to fall for this trap. People are going to want extreme politicians against Israel. That's what people want. And they're going to get what they want. And when that happens, Israel is going to be basically cut off from Western support. And that's going to spell the end of Israel. So it says here, on Friday morning, around 100,000 people participated in a rally in the northern city of Milan. 100,000 people on the streets of Milan, guys. That's crazy. Clashes there briefly erupted after a group of protesters blocking the city's highway started throwing bottles at police, who responded with smoke bombs. I still believe that all this brings no benefit to the Palestinian people. On the other hand, I understand that it will cause a lot of problems for the Italian people, Maloney told reporters. So she's not supporting this, even though the majority of Italians agree with it. She's not supporting it. Why? People are going to be asking why. They're going to say, excuse me, lady, we voted for you. Why are you going against us? Why are you saying things that are to the interest of Israel? Are you really for Italy or are you for Israel? And so this is helping to accelerate this whole global intifada that I'm talking to you guys about. Global uprising against Israel. The Italian leader has been facing mounting pressure to change Italy's stance as a longtime supporter of Israel in the Gaza conflict, as growing calls have emerged to stop the massive humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. So there you go, 2 million people. I'm telling you guys right now, the whole wave against Israel is just going to get bigger and bigger. It's not stopping. It really isn't stopping. So it says here that Turkey's opprobrium has been sharpened by Israel's 12-day multi-front assault on Iranian territory. Its repeated strikes on Syria, which Turkey increasingly views as a protected client state. Hold on, my vision. I need to get glasses, guys. Let me read this again. Turkey's opprobrium has been sharpened by Israel's 12-day multi-front assault on Iranian territory, its repeated strikes on Syria, which Turkey increasingly views as a protected client, and, most significantly, its September 2025 attack on the Hamas delegation in Qatar, Ankara's closest regional ally and a formally designated major non-NATO ally of the United States. So Israel literally bombs an ally of the United States. And the Israelis will say, well, we had a right to bomb them because the Hamas guys were there. Excuse me, those Hamas guys were there for years. They were there for years. They were there after October the 7th. Why didn't you bomb them then? You didn't. Why did you wait this long to bomb them? Why did you decide to bomb them in September of this year? Why? You're crossing a red line. That's what this is. Why did Israel bomb Qatar? I have a theory as to why they did this. Because by bombing Qatar, Israel basically sends the message that negotiations are bullshit. Because what were these Hamas guys doing in Qatar? They were there to discuss and to deliberate the deal between Israel and Gaza. They were there for the purposes of negotiation. That is it. And they were there in a third-party country, Qatar, and they had protected status. And Israel basically said there's no such thing as protected status. Qatar gets bombed. Qatar is a U.S. ally. America didn't do anything about it as a response, except for get Netanyahu to apologize to Qatar. That's all America did. So this does several things. For one, it degrades the idea of relying on the United States. Yes. It degrades the idea of relying on the United States. Well, we got bombed. America didn't do shit about it. So what has America done recently? The Trump administration came up with this security pact with Qatar, and the Trump administration and the Qatari government signed a security pact that supposedly guarantees that an attack on Qatar will be considered as an attack on the United States, and that the United States will respond to defend Qatar. Now, is this something that's reliable? I have no idea. For one thing, Congress never ratified this security pact, so it's not really something that's set in stone. So it's not going to be something that the next president of the United States will be obligated to follow. So really, it seems like right now it's symbolic, but what does this do to the reputation of the United States? It shows that America can't be relied upon. It shows that even being a U.S. ally doesn't guarantee security. It shows that even harboring a major U.S. military base, which Qatar has, does not guarantee your security. There is a massive U.S. military base. It's the Al Ubaid Air Base in Qatar. It's massive. And so people think, well, we have these military bases in our country. That means we have America's security. We have America's security backing us up. America's got our back because we have these massive military bases. Qatar has a massive military base, Al Ubaid. And that did not guarantee security from Israel. So it erodes the idea of relying on the United States for security. Does not make America look good. It does not. And this is why I say I think eventually America is going to turn its back on Israel. America is going to say, damn it, you Israelis are a freaking liability. You are not to the benefit of the American empire. The whole world is going against you. More and more people are becoming pro-Russia and pro-China because the Russians and the Chinese are pro-Palestine. And so are we going to lose the populations of all these countries? Are we going to lose all the populations of all these countries to Russia and China because of some evangelical flag wavers who want to hump the Wailing Wall? Is that what we're going to do? Is that the bullshit that we're going to follow with here? No. And eventually the United States is gonna turn its back on Israel. You already see it with the Democrat Party. You already see it with some Republicans already. You already see it with the younger conservative American crowd. You already see it. It's already there. And so what else does this do? This could also be to the detriment of relations between the United States and Turkey, because Qatar is a major ally to Turkey. Qatar is Turkey's biggest ally in the Gulf region. It's Turkey's biggest ally in the Middle East. It's Turkey's biggest ally in the Arab world. Qatar just got hit. Turkey, one of your biggest allies, just got hit by Israel. What are you going to do about it? This puts pressure on Turkey to then get tougher against Israel. This puts pressure on Turkey to better its military capabilities to prepare for a possible war, possible conflict with Israel. And then another thing that this does is it gets the Turks to tell the Americans, hey, America, your boy Israel just attacked one of our biggest allies, and you didn't do shit about it. So really, can we rely on you, America? Are you really a good, reliable ally, America? Now, Turkey, and I've said this a million times, but I'm going to continue to explain this. Turkey is absolutely essential for the American ally. Turkey is more essential than Israel is. Why do I say this? Because of Turkey's control over the access way from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. I'm talking about the Dardanelles. I'm talking about access into the Sea of Marmara. I'm talking about that access way into the Mediterranean. Turkey controls that access way, and America cannot afford to lose it. America does not want to strain relations with the Turks. So Israel is pissing off Turkey. Israel has just attacked a major Turkish ally. Turkey doesn't like this. America does not want to lose Turkey. And eventually, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to either being on the good side of Turkey or being on the good side of Israel, America is going to choose being on the good side of Turkey, because America does not want to lose that control over the access way from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. Because if America loses that control, that means Turkey getting closer to Russia. That means Russia having unfettered, unhindered access into the Mediterranean from the Black Sea, which will help Russia, and which would be really to the erosion of the American empire in the Mediterranean world. So America doesn't want this. And eventually, America's going to say, Israel, you are a fucking liability. You keep breaking rules. You keep crossing red lines. What is this bullshit? You're pissing off Turkey. So it says here, tensions have now expanded because of Israel's actions Tensions have now expanded because Israel's actions directly challenge Turkey's stand. Oh, my God. I hate this. I need to focus. Focus. I hate this. Tensions have now expanded because Israel's actions directly challenge Turkey's standing in the region. For Ankara, the quarrel now feels less about morality than about raw security. So Israel has been bombing Syria. Israel bombs Qatar. Syria is considered to be a part of Turkey's sphere of influence. America wants Turkey to be in Syria to keep the Russians out. America does not want to lose Turkey's power over Syria. Israel wants to push the Turks out. Israel does not want Turkey to be running Syria. Turkey sees this as a threat to its security. Turkey will eventually be pushed into a position where it will say either we attack Israel or either we go to war with Israel or else we're going to become nothing but a paper tiger and a weak country. We have to fight in order for us to maintain our respect in the region and maintain our position as a regional power. So it says here that Israel's escalation in Iran, Syria, and Qatar represent a direct challenge to Turkey's regional posture. That's right. So Turkey is saying, eventually, we're going to have to go to war with Israel. And Turkey is the second biggest member of NATO. If NATO is still going to exist by the time Israel and Turkey go to war, is America going to stand with Turkey against Israel? Because Turkey is a massive member of NATO. And the whole thing is, when one NATO country is at war, the rest of NATO has to help that NATO country. So is America going to side with Turkey, the second biggest member of NATO, or is it going to side with Israel? I believe America is going to say, we wash our hands of you, Israel. That's it. Ankara sees Syria as the arena where its hand has strengthened most. So Syria is Turkey's ticket to becoming an empire. Turkey wants to be an empire. How does Turkey be an empire? It controls Syria. That's it. Syria borders with Turkey. It's not that difficult for Turkey to invade Syria. It's not that difficult for Turkey to send troops into Syria. Turkey has controlled the Idlib province in northern Syria for many years. It's not that difficult. So how does Turkey establish itself as a Near Eastern empire? By controlling Syria. If Turkey loses Syria, it loses its entire enterprise, its entire aspiration of being an empire. It loses. It goes back. Guys, remember 2022. Remember what happened to Ukraine in February of 2022. Remember what happened to Ukraine in the winter of 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine. Why? Because if Russia wants to be a regional power, it's going to have to control Ukraine. This is not me saying this. This is Zbigniew-Brzezinski saying this. And Zbigniew-Brzezinski was simply following the Mackinder policy, or the Mackinder law of geopolitics, which is whoever controls Eastern Europe controls the center of Europe, whoever controls the center of Europe controls Europe, whoever controls Europe controls the world. This is the whole idea of the Mackinder theory, or the Mackinder rule of geopolitics. It also applies to Central Asia. You have to control Eurasia if you really want to dominate the world. So you have to control Eastern Europe. You have to control Central Asia. Bottom line. So if Russia is going to be an empire, it needs to control what? Eastern Europe. It already controls Belarus. Belarus and Russia are the same country. So it already has that part of Eastern Europe. If Russia can take control of Ukraine, Russia is an empire. It maintains itself as a regional power, as a serious power, as a significant power. If it loses Ukraine, it doesn't have significance, and America will still be controlling Ukraine, and thus America will be controlling the center and will be out-rivaling Russia. The American empire will still be winning in such a case. This is why the Americans are so adamant about Ukraine. This is why the Europeans are so adamant about Ukraine, because they know if Russia takes Ukraine, Russia is an empire. That's it. Russia is officially an empire. It's no longer just some giant freaking gas station as they perceive it, right? And I'm not saying that that's correct. I'm not saying that this is the correct perspective of Russia, but I'm simply saying that's how the Europeans see Russia, as a giant gas station. The moment Russia takes over Ukraine, it will no longer be seen in that light. It will be seen as an empire, and it will have to be respected, because at that point, Russia will be smack right next to Poland. Now, to a great extent, it is already next to Poland because of Kaliningrad, but the problem is that Kaliningrad, while it is technically Russia, it does not share a contiguous border with Russia. So it's cut off from mainland Russia, just like Alaska is cut off from mainland America, or Hawaii is cut off from mainland America. So if Russia can control Ukraine, that means Russia would be right next to Poland. It'll border right with Central Europe. It will be a major power, major power. So this is a huge deal for the Russians. Now, what were the Americans doing for decades? They were meddling in Russia. You had the freaking National Endowment for Democracy putting tons of money into Ukraine, backing revolutionary groups, backing anti-government groups. Eventually, this all culminated into the 2014 Euromaidan. You had literally a Nazi coup. You had Andrei Parubi, who was the commandant of the Euromaidan movement. Andrei Parubi is a Ukrainian neo-Nazi. He was running the show. You had a bunch of other Nazis who were involved in the Euromaidan. It was a Nazi far-right nationalist coup. They said, we hate the Russians because of what Stalin did to our people, blah, blah, blah. They said, God bless Bandera, kill Polish people, kill Russians. They took over freaking Ukraine. That was America's way. That was America's way of moving the chess piece against Russia. So Russia said, okay, you want to play that game? We're going to take over freaking Crimea. They took over Crimea. That was the beginning. That was in 2014. Fast forward to 2022, boom, Russia invades. Why? You literally gave Russia no other choice. Because Russia said, listen, Ukraine's the red line. They were saying this for years. All the signs were there. All of the signs were there. Pat Buchanan was warning America about this. You had Michael Mendelbaum warning America about this. You had George Kennan, the architect of America's Cold War policy, warning about this. I know that Zbigniew Brzezinski was very aware of how important Ukraine was to the Russians. All of the signs were there. We did not give a shit. And the reason why we didn't give a shit is because we did not respect Russia. And that lack of respect is what pushes countries to go to war, because they're saying, hey, we're not respected. We have to show our teeth. And the teeth were shown. And Russia bit the fuck out of NATO. And they're still biting it. It all could have been prevented if we just respected Russia's sphere of influence. Right now, and I'm not like a super pro-Turkey guy. Don't get me wrong. I don't like what Turkey did to the Armenians in Artsakh in 2020, 2022, and 2023. But understanding a realist geopolitics, we can also understand that Turkey has its sphere of influence. And if it is not respected long enough, it will fight. It will go to war. Israel don't give a shit. They don't respect nobody. That's the thing about Israel. They don't respect nobody. They're like the pro-Israel Zionists that I used to hang out with. They didn't respect anyone. They go to a restaurant, they're yelling at the waitress right there and then. They're lying about the order so they can get a free item from the menu. They're saying, "Oh, you guys gave me the wrong item," when they really did not give them the wrong item, so that the manager can get on his knees and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll give you a free dinner of your choice on the house," and they got a free meal out of it. That type of scummy shit, right? All of that bespeaks an absence of respect. Okay, so that is a microcosm of Israel. Israel does not respect other countries' sphere of influence. Israel doesn't respect other countries' autonomy in space. They bombed Qatar. Now, you could say, well, because Qatar was backing Hamas. Who the fuck facilitated Qatari dollars going into Gaza? It was the Netanyahu government. So please, fuck off with that bullshit. That's bullshit. Secondly, Qatar is a major U.S. ally. Thirdly, Qatar was hosting the negotiations on a potential peace deal, or at least a ceasefire in Gaza. That's what Qatar was doing. And the other thing that I want to add is that it was the United States that told Qatar to host negotiations for the war in Gaza. So Qatar was simply doing what America asked it to do. So Israel bombing Qatar was completely uncalled for, and they crossed a red line. So now, when you cross a red line, what message are you sending out? Let's be real here. It's like this. If I go to you and I say, hey, let's do some friendly sparring. You say, okay, all right, here's the rule. No punches to the face. I can punch you in the stomach. I can punch you in the chest. I can punch you in the shoulder. I can punch you in the ribs. But I can't punch you in the face. We have agreed that we're not going to punch each other in the face, right? Because when I punch you in the body, it's going to hurt, but it's not really personal. There's something about getting hit in the face that's very psychological and very personal, especially if you get hit in the nose. Very psychologically painful and very physically painful. So let's say we're in the middle of this little friendly sparring match and we have agreed to the rules that we're not going to punch each other in the face, and I, bam, pop you right in the face. What message am I giving to you? The message I'm giving to you is I don't give a shit about respecting you. I don't respect you. So now you're put in a position where if you don't punch me in the face, you have no honor. I have forced you into that position where either you don't punch me in the face and you continue to follow the rules and then look weak and you are allowing me to bully you, or you punch me in the face as a response in order to either send the message to me that you're going to fight back, and maybe that's going to get me to calm down and say, hey, I'm sorry about that, let's go back to the rules. Or it's just going to escalate into a full-on fight where we're just going to punch each other in the face, and it's no longer a friendly sparring match. Either way, the person, by being punched in the face, has been put into a corner where he only has two options: show his teeth and regain respect, or maintain not having the respect that you want. So the same type of concept applies to geopolitics. The same thing applies to geopolitics. Israel crosses a red line, bombs Qatar. Turkey, hey Turkey, Qatar is one of your best buds. What are you going to do? Are you a regional power or are you not? Syria is a part of Turkey's sphere of influence. Well, guess what, Turkey? Boom, 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 boom. We're bombing the T4 air base. We're going to bomb other parts of Syria. We're putting our troops in southern Syria. What message does that send to the Turks? Either you show teeth or you don't. And you are no longer considered a regional power. And eventually Turkey will show its teeth because it does want to be an empire. So it says here that in stark contrast, Israel's strategic calculus favors a weak, decentralized, and persistently unstable Syria. Yes, Israel wants to see an unstable Syria. This is what Israel wants. Because an unstable Syria means a weak Turkey. An unstable Syria means Turkey will not control Syria. That's what that means. In stark contrast, Israel's strategic calculus favors a weak, decentralized, and persistently unstable Syria. That's why Israel was backing Syrian rebels. That's why Israel was backing the idea of having a civil war in Syria, because it wanted to see Syria weak and unstable, and it still wants to see Syria weak and unstable. It does not want to see Syria united, because a united Syria means that Turkey can control it. That means a strong Turkish sphere of influence. That's what that means. With a military largely stripped of heavy capabilities similar to Lebanon, this fundamental divergence puts Turkey and Israel at cross purposes inside Syria. Like I've always said, Israel and Turkey, they both have antithetical aspirations. They both have antithetical goals. And the goal of Turkey is to have empire. Is to control Syria. The goal of Israel is also to have empire, and that would mean preventing Turkey from controlling Syria. By targeting Qatar, Israel demonstrated its willingness to ignore the red lines that long constrained interstate force in the region and challenged not only U.S. adversaries, but also states closely tied to Washington. So they're going against American allies. Turkey, Qatar. And remember, guys, public opinion is extremely vital for political power. If I want to control your country, I best damn well make sure that your people like me. How am I going to do that? Because if your people like me, it's going to be very easy to control your country. All I got to do is invade. People love me. Why do you think it was so easy for Russia to invade Donbass? Because the vast majority of people in Donbass are pro-Russia. Why do you think Russia hasn't tried invading Western Ukraine? Because the vast majority of Western Ukrainians are Nazis. Banderite, anti-Russia Nazis. Very difficult for Russia to control that region. That's the thing. So America is very concerned about public opinion, the opinion of all the populations in the countries that are vital for America's interests. America cares about what people in Japan think, because America wants Japan on America's side against the Chinese. The vast majority of the Japanese people are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. Vast majority of people in Italy are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. Vast majority of people in Poland are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. The vast majority of people in Spain are pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. The vast majority of the vast majority of the populations in the American in the world of American allies are anti-Israel. So America is saying we could lose the favor of the populations of these countries. We can't have that. And are we just going to allow that to happen because we want to wave the Israeli flag because some pastor told us to? No. We don't want that to happen. So I think America is just going to say, listen, Israel, we had a good run. We had what? What was it? We had a good solid 5 decades or so, right? 6, 7 decades. We had a good run. So we're just going to cut our losses. And we'll just hope for the best for you. All right. Bye-bye. Shalom, shalom. Because we don't want to lose Turkey. And Turkey's rising. And Israel, you've done a lot to piss off Turkey. Israel will go down fighting. That is true, Sam. But it's going to go down nonetheless. That's right. It's going to put up a hell of a fight. Don't get me wrong. But it's going to go down. If Israel's 12-year war, or 12-year war, what is wrong with me? If Israel's 12-day war with Iran was any lesson, Israel will go down. We can we can feel safe in saying that. We can feel very confident in predicting that Israel is going to go down. Because Iran bombed the shit out of Israel, and Israel didn't get past 12 days. It needed America. So, I don't know. Israel is a very suicidal country. That's one thing that you have to keep in mind. Israel committed mass suicide when it was doing its war against the Romans, and they're being very self-destructive right now. So it's just not going to work for them, and they're going to go down. They're going down the same road of self-destruction as they did before their temple was destroyed. For Turkey, the message was clear. Israel does not consider itself bound by prior regional equations, diplomatic understandings, or the deterrent value of the American security umbrella. That's right. Turkey's strength makes Israel more cautious about direct strikes, yet retaliation would be almost unavoidable if one occurred. So if Israel strikes Turkey, Turkey will retaliate. And here's the thing. If Israel attacks Turkey, Turkey's a major member of NATO. Are they going to pull Article 5 out of their ass to defend Turkey against Israel? Is America going to say, okay, Israel, you've just attacked Turkey. That's a major NATO member. An attack on one member is an attack on all of the members, as Article 5 says, so we're going to have to go to war with Israel. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think America is going to rally up the whole NATO alliance to go to war against Israel to defend Turkey. I think America and the rest of NATO is just going to say, we're not getting involved. And at that point, if NATO still exists before that point, NATO will just become nothing. NATO will just become a figurative group that'll be completely meaningless. For Ankara's security elites, Tel Aviv's repeated disregard for regional red lines make the region more volatile, while a direct clash remains unlikely. And this is where I disagree with this author. While a direct clash remains unlikely, the likeliest scenario for escalation is an unintended clash in Syria, where Israeli strikes could by miscalculation hit Turkish positions. It wouldn't be a miscalculation, by the way. And I disagree with the author when he says that a clash between Turkey and Israel is unlikely. I think it's very likely. And I think that if it wasn't unlikely, then why in the hell did the Najal Committee tell Netanyahu to prepare for a potential war with Turkey if it's not unlikely, or if it's not likely, right? It's blatantly likely, very likely to say the least. And they both want to control Syria. And it's one of those situations where both sides are saying Syria ain't big enough for the both of us. You know, we're not going to co-rule Syria. And if they do decide to co-rule Syria under some attempt by the United States to establish diplomatic ties between Syria and Turkey, it'll be very symbolic and it's not going to last forever. It will eventually erode itself out of existence. That's the thing. And so eventually a clash is inevitable. It's inevitable. It has to happen because of Syria. Israel wants to control it. Turkey wants to control it. Turkey needs Syria. It needs Syria. Hilaire Belloc makes a really interesting observation. But Hilaire Belloc is a very underrated but brilliant writer. And I recommend that everyone read Hilaire Belloc. I recommend that people read his book on heresies, read his book on the whole dilemma with the Jewish people. There's a book that he wrote called The Jews, which is a brilliant, brilliant text. He wrote it in 1922, and he warned the world in that book that if the rage against the Jews in Europe is not abated somehow, then there will be a bloodbath of the Jews. There will be a slaughter of the Jews in Europe. And he said that the Germans especially will slaughter the Jews. He predicted the Holocaust in 1922. I mean, the guy was brilliant. But Hilaire Belloc also wrote about Islam and the Ottoman Empire. And he wrote that in order to control the Muslim world, you have to control Syria. So it says here that yet Turkey's confidence in NATO has been eroded by past episodes. And now, this is interesting. So the author gets into the concept of Turkey being able to trust America and being able to trust America's security umbrella in the Middle East. So it says here that yet Turkey's confidence in NATO has been eroded by past episodes in which collective defense was either publicly dismissed or left ambiguous, such as in 2015, when Ankara downed a Russian jet and NATO quickly made clear that Article 5 would not be invoked in the event of Russian retaliation. So Turkey shoots down this Russian plane, and America said, listen, Turkey, we're not going to go to war with Russia for you. Because let's be real here, America is scared shitless of Russia. They are. America is scared shitless of Russia because America knows that Russia can destroy the United States. They're scared shitless of the Russians. They don't want a war with Russia. Even if that means fighting for NATO, America does not want a war with Russia. Not a direct one, at least. So America says to Turkey, listen, we know you shot down this Russian plane, but we're not going to help you if Russia retaliates. Or in 2020... when Russian airstrikes killed dozens of Turkish soldiers. Yes, this happened in February of 2020. The Russians killed dozens of Turkish soldiers in Syria, and NATO didn't do shit about it, even though Turkey is a major member of NATO. More recently, the American failure to shield Qatar and muted reactions to Russian drones over Poland have further undermined confidence in alliance. In the NATO alliance. This is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So drones are flying into Poland. They're saying it's Russian drones. I don't know if they are Russian drones. Could be Poland just playing games. Could be Ukraine playing games. But Poland is saying, hey, Russia just flew a bunch of drones into our airspace. What are you going to do about it, NATO? And America hasn't done fuck all about it. America hasn't done a damn thing about it. Nothing. America hasn't done anything about it. So that is eroding this idea that you can trust the United States. And what could happen is people are just going to say, the Europeans are just going to say, you know what, we can't trust America. Let's make our military strong again. That's what the Germans are doing. The Turks are saying, Israel just bombed our great ally, Qatar. Russia killed dozens of our troops in Syria. America didn't do shit about it. Really, America? Can we really trust you? Why do you think Turkey is boosting up its military innovation? Why do you think Turkey is growing its own indigenous military industry? Why do you think Turkey is on the verge of putting into operation its first ever 5th generation fighter jet, the Khan fighter jet? It's because Turkey knows if it's going to make an empire, it's going to have to rely on itself. So that's why you see the Germans boosting up their military. That's why you see the Turks doing it. That's why you see the Japanese doing it, because they know that they really can't 100% rely on the United States. And so Turkey is saying, man, America, you got more loyalty to Israel than to NATO. So can we really trust NATO? And if Turkey and Israel go to war, which they will, is NATO going to go to war to support Turkey, which is a major NATO ally? I don't think so. I think America is just going to sit that one out, and they're going to watch as Turkey tears Israel apart, just as they watched Iran pound Israel for days. And America just did a little figurative strike on Iran, did not destroy Iran's nuclear project, but just did a figurative strike just to show Israel, look, we really care. But when Iran was pounding the fuck out of Israel, America sort of just sat that one out. Now, they did try to intercept Iranian missiles, but it didn't really fully help. They couldn't stop all of those hypersonic missiles. They couldn't stop all of those ballistic missiles. America sort of just sat this one out. And when the Zionists in the United States were saying, oh, we have to defend Israel, what was the rest of America saying? F you, the hell we're not. We're not going to go to war. Even Charlie Kirk was saying, I don't want to go to a conventional war to defend Israel against Iran. Even that's why they got mad at Charlie. Why do you think they hated Charlie so much? That's why. That's one of the reasons why. So I think if Israel and Turkey have a full-on war, I think America's just going to sit that one out. And they're going to watch as Turkey tears Israel apart, just like those hyenas teared Scar apart in The Lion King. And it says here, European strategic autonomy is in German hands. Now, what did I say recently? A lot of people got mad at me for this, but I said Germany is rising. And a lot of people disagree with me. Almost all the comments disagreed with me, which is crazy. Because it's almost like, if you disagree with me when I say Germany is coming back, you really have to have an ahistorical view. If you look at history, you always see Germany having this pretty intense, pretty significant geopolitical position. World War I, World War II, and even before that, 30 years war. Germany has had, for the longest time, a serious, significant geopolitical position in Europe. So Germany is going to have a significant position in the future. And you see Germany really moving to that point. And so I'm really shocked that so many people are oblivious to this reality. I just don't know why so many people disagree with me on this, but that's fine. I think the truth will show itself inevitably anyway. Time will tell who is right, who is wrong. But I'm going to read to you guys this article. I thought this was pretty interesting. European strategic autonomy is in German hands. In other words, if we're going to have a rising Europe or a rising European power, it's got to be Germany. Because Germany has the money, Germany has the industry, Germany has the innovation. Germany has over 80 million people, so it has quite a big population. It's one of the biggest economies in the world. Germany has all of the wherewithal to become the most powerful country in Europe and one of the most powerful countries in the world. So it says here that as Berlin inevitably becomes the EU's dominant military power, its billions could either build or blur Macron's vision of European defense. So Macron has this vision of a Franco-German military alliance where you'll have the French with their nuclear security umbrella, and then you'll have the Germans, and the Germans will have this big army, and the French army will unite with the German army, and then other European militaries will join forces with this Franco-German force. And this is the dream of France. France is not dreaming of Germany being the most dominant military in Europe. France is dreaming of a Franco-German alliance. But this article is saying, listen, a European sovereign military force is going to be in Germany's hands. So it says here, an age-old French nightmare, that of growing German military might, is resurfacing in a new form. Indeed, 19th and 20th century anxieties over a cross-Rhine invasion have long been obliterated by the Franco-German partnership within European and Atlantic alliances. Moreover, Berlin's current plans to double defense spending is welcomed in France as a bulwark against both Russian aggression and U.S. disengagement, so they're planning for America to sort of separate itself to a great extent from Europe. Yet, according to anonymous government officials, French President Emmanuel Macron is said to be obsessed with the huge fiscal freedom Germany possesses to rearm itself over the next 5 years, especially compared to cash-strapped France. So Germany has what France doesn't have, and that is the economy that Germany has. When you have money, you can make a massive army. When you have one of the biggest economies in the world, you can make a pretty massive army with that money. You can build very effective technology. So France is saying, okay, we want to have this Franco-German alliance, but according to these sources, Emmanuel Macron is very envious of Germany's economy. Macron wants for France to have the economy that Germany has, or really, Macron wants for France to have what Germany has, and that is this unlimited spending policy for its military. So it says here that he fears an invasion, not of French territory, but of his country's preeminent position as the EU's most effective military diplomatic power. So the French are worried about being replaced diplomatically by the Germans. That speaks volumes. So all of you guys who told me, oh, Ted, you're wrong about this rising Germany and all this stuff, the French know. The French are scared of this. They're worried about being geopolitically, diplomatically replaced by the Germans. They're worried about their geopolitical significance being eclipsed by Germany. They're worried. They see the writing on the wall. I'm shocked that you guys can't see the writing on the wall. I've read enough about World War I, World War II, the 30 Years' War to know, for the longest time, Germany has had a significant position geopolitically. And it says here, he's also worried about whether Germany's billions will be used to build or blur his vision of a strategically autonomous European defense industry. So Macron wants this Franco-German alliance to form this pan-European military force. And what Germany wants is for a powerful Deutschland that will lead Europe. That's the difference. Germany says, we're not so certain about this Franco-German alliance, but what we do want is for Germany to be the most powerful country in Europe and to thus at that point lead European militaries, to lead the other European militaries. So in other words, it'll be Europe's various militaries being led by a powerful Deutschland, a powerful revived German empire in Europe. People don't see this because a lot of you guys, let's be real here, a lot of you guys are buying into this whole right-wing doomerism of Germany's just, oh my God, guys, they're just weak, man. They're weak. They're literally one of the biggest economies in the world. They're like the fourth largest economy on earth or something like that. So it says here, this is a pretty good article. It says here, in theory, both countries are bound by NATO members' new pledge to spend 3.5% of GDP on defense by 2035. But while Germany has a credible plan to reach that target by 2029, short of vast grants from an EU defense fund that may never exist, France has no obvious way to both honor its NATO commitment and cut its budget deficit to 3% of GDP in 4 years. So in other words, France's economy is restraining France's space to have unlimited spending on its military, or at least to spend 3.5% of its GDP on its defense. Germany has that economic capacity, and Germany recently said, I talked about this until I was blue in the face months ago. Germany said, we're not going to put limits on our spending when it comes to military. They said, we're going to have unlimited spending on the German military. I mean, really? The idea of a Fourth Reich coming is pretty inevitable. It's very clear. So it says here that still some senior French officials who spoke on condition of anonymity dismissed fears that Germany's new military might, and to some extent Poland's, will erode Paris's clout in Brussels. They argued that France's special status within the EU is also born of its global military reach, its permanent UN Security Council membership, and its nuclear deterrent. Yeah, regardless of all of this, let's be real. I mean, Germany is going to become the most powerful military in Europe. French military chiefs who asked to remain unnamed were also dismissive of the Bundeswehr's capacity to become an efficient force after 8 decades of historical aversion to all things military. They said the catch-up spending is welcome and important, but it will be many years before the German army and air force can match France's. Well, I mean, the French and the Germans can still make an alliance, or they can still deepen their alliance, but that still doesn't change the trajectory of Germany becoming the most powerful country in Europe. That's going to happen. That's inevitable. This idea that the Bundeswehr will remain weak, I'm not so certain about that, because the German armed forces was very, very weak and fragile after World War I, but yet it managed to become the most powerful military in the world, or at least one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And during World War II, you had how many freaking empires go against Germany at the same time? The British Empire, the Russian Empire. The Soviet Union was the Russian Empire. Let's be real here. And you had the American Empire, the United States. All three empires going against Germany at the same time. And the Germans still managed to slaughter millions of Allied troops. Millions. So this is how dangerous this country can become if it really shows its true boss form, if you know what I mean. And if nationalism totally revives in Germany, and it is reviving, but if it revives to a very complete form, to its full boss form, you will have a lot of young men in Germany being incentivized to join the military, to fight for Deutschland, not NATO, to fight for blood and soil. The more immediate problem, however, is the direction of travel. Will the German military help forge a more strategically autonomous European defense industry, create European jobs, and strengthen European economic power? Or will it pour money into off-the-shelf U.S. military hardware and favor industrial alliances with American defense giants? Well, that's the thing, though. See, Donald Trump has made this deal with the Europeans, wherein the Europeans are just going to buy American weapons, and then they're going to send those weapons to Ukraine. But this is really incentivizing the Europeans to boost up their own indigenous, independent military-industrial complex. That is why the biggest defense company in Europe, Rheinmetall, has grown precipitously recently. That's why it's grown leaps and bounds recently. It's because the Germans are pursuing independent military production, military industry. And that's only going to grow. And again, a lot of this comes back to respect. Germany wants to be a major power. Germany wants to be geopolitically significant. It can't reach that point if it's dependent on the United States, which means the Germans are going to have to free themselves of the fetters of American control. And I think that a lot of people in the U.S. government want this to happen. You have people, for example, what's his name? Eldridge Colby, who was in the Trump administration. Eldridge Colby has talked about allowing Europe to go its own way, allowing the Germans to go its own way, so that way the Americans can focus more on China. And America does want to focus more on China because China is the second largest economy in the world, and it is the biggest economic threat to the United States, which means America is going to be focusing more on really boosting up the power of the Japanese, to use the Japanese against the Chinese, possibly using the Uyghur Muslims in Central Asia against the Han Chinese. And so I think what the Americans plan on doing is allowing the Europeans to become more powerful, allowing the Germans to be this powerful country, so that way the Americans can say, okay, Germany, you handle Russia, while we handle the Chinese. So it says here that at times, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz echoes Macron on the matter, saying that the surge in his country's defense spending must have a European framework and promote European strategic sovereignty. Well, we all know what this is about. This is about Germany just running the show in Europe, and Germany being the most powerful military in Europe while leading various European militaries, which would just be really auxiliary forces for the Fourth Reich. So it says here, on other occasions, he has spoken of a coalition contract within NATO and the importance of the transatlantic partnership, blah, blah, blah. Either way, the sheer scale of Berlin's spending in the years ahead will inevitably make its defense industry the key player in European military innovation and procurement. So Germany will be the biggest dog in the block. Amazingly, I predicted this in 2016. Nobody believed me, but every year I get more and more proven correct. I think somebody in the chat said it must be frustrating to be able to foretell things 5 years before they happen. What's frustrating is telling people what's going to happen and then basing historical reality on your prediction, and then people just being ahistorical and just ignoring history and saying, who gives a shit about history? That's what makes it so frustrating. But it says here, it is therefore vital that Berlin and Paris immediately establish a pattern for the upcoming boom years and double down on their political commitment to Franco-German cooperation in defense, innovation, training, and procurement. The window of opportunity is narrow, and afterward, there will only be room to implement the decisions already made. The majority view in Paris is that German rearmament will raise these questions of industrial balance long before it raises issues of political balance within the EU. But Merz also understands that unless it's embedded in a European consensus, Germany's military might could become a political problem, and not just for the French. Oof, interesting. Germany's military might could become a political problem. What does that mean? A political problem for who? For Russia? Sure, most definitely. Nonetheless, France will be looking at the decade ahead anxiously, as Germany will retain its status as Europe's industrial powerhouse, as well as become, just by sheer size, the dominant military power within the EU. The uncomfortable truth for France is that when it comes to the creation of a European defense industry and even the potential rapid increase of France's own military capacity, strategic autonomy is now in Germany's hands. So Germany will be leading Europe in its military might. Germany will be leading Europe as the most powerful military in the continent. Bottom line.